Breathe in, breathe out. Okay, I tried. But heads up, this podcast does contain potty mouth. Keep that in mind as you listen on the public toilet. On today's show, I'm talking with Meliea Black, a person I've known all my life on one hand, and I'm just getting to know on the other. She's the queer, ex-vangelical, mystic, midwife, moon maven, intuition activist. And she's here with us today, helping to smash oppressive influences and build up radical self-trust. Hey y'all, I'm Grace, and this is Mediocre Mystic, the podcast where we explore how mediocre makes the world go round and how mediocre works in mysterious ways. Thanks so much for tuning your forks and ears in. Hey Meliea, and hey to all of you listening. This has literally been a year in the making. And we are so determined that nothing would stop us this time. And damn if we didn't finally pull it off. I got to hug your neck.
We're here.
We're here. If you're a longtime listener and you have heard the story of my name change, you might remember that Meliea was my middle name previously. If you missed that, you can catch it on episode 3 of season 1. So.
I did not know that.
Yes. So first name, Meliea. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, and then let's chat a little about our history and a whole lot about where we are now.
Okay. It's always hard to talk about myself. I am kind of an ever-evolving, ever-changing thing. So whatever I say about myself here today may or may not still be true in 6 months. But right now, I am a midwife. Birth is my work right now. I'm a mom. I have 3 kids, ages 31, 24, and 14, because I'm insane. And, I'm just getting through this pandemic life like everybody else right now, trying to figure out what I'm going to do when I grow up. I just turned 50, but I haven't grown up yet, so I'm still finding myself. I am gay and single, just putting that out there. I do whatever I feel like I'm supposed to be doing in the moment, which is usually always something different. I pivot a lot.
So one of the things I really love about you, as I've watched you over the last year especially, is that you're not afraid to change your brand.
Well, much like my journey with religion, I haven't always been like this. I'm the way I am now out of pure exhaustion from trying to be the other way. I started out in this online space trying to do things like everybody else. If I had all the money I spent on courses to tell me how to do an online business, I could take us all on a cruise right now. But I tried to do it the quote right way because I am a Virgo. And so I want to do things the right way and I want them to be perfect. But damn it, it's the doing it part that always gets me in trouble because I just can't follow the plan. And I feel like I'm not able to be my authentic self. And it's funny because all the people who teach those courses and stuff will say, you can still be your authentic self within this framework. And I'm like, I can't. I've tried. Where I am now is a product of trying to fit in and fit the framework.
I want to talk a little bit about our history. Melia's mom, from the time I was 12 until really my mid-20s. And at that time, Meliea and I didn't have a lot of interaction. It was very much for me a spiritual mom and in a nonprofit that we volunteered in together. And her mom actually worked for that, but I volunteered. And also, of course, just helping me with things like colleges and just things like that a mom would do because my mom wasn't around. And my dad and your mom were great friends. And it really taught me the value of community. And your mom taught me all the best ways to love somebody because she loved everyone in the best way, including me.
She did.
Your mama taught me how to be a casserole connoisseur. And if anyone's like been tracking with the pod, you know what that means. What that means for me is your mama taught me how to care for somebody and how to let them know, like, you're my people, you're my family, I love you, you're my chosen, people, my chosen family, I love you, I'm caring for you. And that's why I relate casseroles into community, not Lay's potato chips and tuna. So, but, you were always on this periphery, but we really didn't meet up until a lot later in life. Mm-hmm. And I'm loving that because we met at a time where we were both in a similar space, leaving religion and leaving that background we had come from. Talk a little bit about your mama and, that connection between us. What's the greatest lesson she taught you?
So we've talked about people who are into fundamentalism for power, for control, for clout, all these different things. My mom was authentic. She wasn't just going through the motions. She wasn't doing something to gain favor with God or anything like that. She truly felt like that was an expression of love, and that's why she was here. And so people who remember my mom, remember that about her. And
she was actually doing the Jesus thing.
She really was. And so that authenticity that she had for it is probably what saved me from even more trauma, in the religious setting, knowing that she was real, that the love she had was real. That is something to cling to. And so I have tried to love people in that same way. When people talk about my mom and the beautiful person that she was, that's why they remember her that way, is because everything she did was a true extension of her heart.
She's passed on.
Yeah.
And though she has, in a lot of ways for me, she's more present than ever.
Yeah.
Remembering that skill, putting that skill into action, just and honor her memory by paying it forward, right? To me, she was the original pay it forward person.
Yeah.
So I think the thing for us to really take from this into the rest of our conversation is to understand that authenticity, and that our authenticity looks different.
Right.
But perhaps we're honoring her by simply doing our authentic selves, right? Doing our authentic thing. And so for you describe yourself on melieablack.com as, quote, the queer, ex-vangelical, mystic, midwife, moon maven, intuition activist. Now, I am a fan of alliteration, so that just warmed my heart.
Same.
But let's kind of unpack that and talk about your story using those beautiful descriptions. What was coming out for you, like coming from this background of evangelical Christianity?
I think the most shocked person to find out I was gay was me.
I was the last one to know, so I totally get that.
I did not know. Even though the first person I ever kissed was a girl. I was like 11 years old. Anyway, that was that. But at 11 years old, I knew that was not okay. Like, there was a slumber party situation. There was hormones. There was kissing. But then immediately upon getting home, there was shame. Mm. Like the deepest, like I'm talking about it right now, and I can see myself sitting on my bed, clutching my chest, thinking that this is it. Like there's nothing godly about me. I am definitely going to hell because I'm a homosexual, which was the word that was used in my church at that time. Thank you, Mr. Falwell. But, I thought, oh my gosh, this is one of those terrible things that people do that hate God. And so now I've done it. What does that mean? And I felt such shame, but I also really liked it. And so there was that. I really wanted to do it again. There was that. But then a few days later, I got a letter in the mail from my friend saying that she felt terribly shamed She was so ashamed. She had asked God to forgive her. She was asking my forgiveness and was hoping that we could just never, just pretend it didn't happen and never talk about it again. And that's what we did. And I never really talked about it again. So my reaction to that was, I need to, and this is part of my pivot. This is part of how I pivot in life. My reaction to that was, okay, I need to become as boy crazy as I can possibly be. I just have to immerse myself in heterosexuality, which I didn't know that word at the time, but that's what it was. I need to immerse myself in this so that I can get that part of myself out of me. So then I became the quote, boy crazy girl. I mean, I'm 50 years old now. I came out at 47 after 3 marriages and many hetero relationships. Always wondering why sex wasn't as fun for me as it seemed to be for all my hetero friends. They seem to really, they got this. And I'm just sitting here something is missing. I didn't even realize at the time what was missing until.
Right.
Yeah. But I just wasn't even self-aware enough to understand that being attracted to women was not just, quote, a struggle.
Right.
It was me.
Wasn't a thorn in the flesh.
No, it was me. It was always there. My Barbie dolls were lesbians, okay? I didn't even play with the Ken doll. He drove the van. That was it. So it was always there. It was hard, that part, and it's still been hard a little bit.
And your coming out is inextricably linked to being ex-vangelical, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the second descriptor you give us. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came out of evangelicalism? I have a wonderful story about a near-death experience that you had that really sort of began that journey for you and pulled you out of that. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, and there's I actually do it in detail in my book, and that's the first time I've ever really written it out. But
what was that like for you, writing it out?
It was neat. It's still so fresh in my mind. I can still see it like it happened yesterday.
Yeah.
But there were other things that led up to that too. I was in my 3rd marriage that was going to the shitter. I was trying to figure out why do I keep marrying, men who blah 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 blah. And finally I had this aha moment with she's a local I was a teacher, but she was doing meditation one night or something, and she said something about, if you keep finding yourself in the same situations, the common denominator is you. And I'm like, oh shit. This is me. I keep doing this. And so that was kind of where the awakening sort of began. And then that led to kind of this deep introspection of why. Why do I keep marrying the same man or dating the same man in a different form every time? What is that? And so that was the beginning of my introspection, which is what started making me see that I was trying to please God. I had a car accident for local people on 485, where everybody goes 85, literally. And somebody clipped me, I spun, I flipped, I did all kinds of things. It was an accident that should have killed me. When people see the pictures, they just gasp. They don't even know what to say. And I survived. And I survived without a whole lot wrong with me. But while I was flipping and turning and whatever it was that my car was doing, I had this moment of the most peace that I've ever felt in my life. Like, I was so calm. I was not scared. I wasn't worried. I felt overcome with love. I saw colors. It was weird. If you go into like a car wash and the soap sprays on and it's yellow and purple and pink and all, and it mixes all together, that's what I saw. It was like the colors all around me. And I just remember thinking, I'm going to be fine. Like, I'm fine. This is fine. There's nothing to be afraid of here. And that was so counter to the life I was living at that time, which was chronic anxiety. And I was sitting in the hospital that night after experiencing that moment that maybe lasted 30 seconds, but it felt like it lasted forever. And I remember sitting in the hospital and thinking, I don't belong here. Like, I felt like an alien on another planet. Like, I had seen something I couldn't unsee. I'd experienced something I couldn't unexperience. And now I felt like a whole different person. And that was a harsh realization to figure that out.
So what do you call that place? Because the truth is, fundamentalism exists everywhere, right? So we can go from this sort of very Christian, evangelical world, and then we can switch super hardcore into, you know, what we loosely term as woo-woo, and go all hardcore about that in a very same way, where we're, you know, thumping is thumping.
Right.
Right.
Whether you're thumping the sage or thumping the Bible.
Right. So for you, how did you sort of maintain that balance of, I really want to do this justice, right? I want to honor this feeling. I want to honor this experience. I want to find this peace in a way that doesn't mean I go to fundamentalism in a different way. It means I really do find this in a new way.
Well, I haven't gotten there yet. I left Christianity and, went to the next thing and made that a religion. And I went to another thing and made that a religion. I've made religions out of diets, out of wellness, out of yoga, out of you name it. I've made a religion because I didn't realize that was the part that I hadn't walked away from, was the need for something to validate me, to tell me what to do, and something to kind of worship, and a way to evangelize people.
Sure.
Because now I found the answer. So here, let me tell you about it. And, it's one of those things where, like, I would have this moment again where I'd suddenly wake up and be like, damn it, I'm in a religion again. The good news is I catch it earlier now and I see it before I'm like way deep down the rabbit hole. But I still catch myself doing it all the time.
So it's a process.
It's cycles, right? Like, that's where the moon part of it comes in for me, is like realizing that everything is cyclical. We just keep coming back around to the same thing with a different, environment. We're working through all the same dynamics in cycles.
Right.
And
that's the moon maven piece.
Yes.
And that seems to be the first thing you really kind of caught on to is, hey, life is happening in cycles.
What I love about living life cyclically is that it's being non-linear. I'm not constantly chasing a moving target. There's always a new moon coming. There's always a new beginning coming. That has been what has kept me going through, leaving my marriage, watching my mother die, trying to raise my children, all those things. It was like knowing that it's just, I'm cycling and I'll be at a different place soon and I'll start over again soon. And living in that way is what has saved my mental health. Now, is it biblical? Is it a religion? No, I don't know that it would work for everybody.
Sure.
But it works for me.
But it's this piece of nature that you sort of identified it within your own nature.
Yes.
And connected those two together and can understand and process your life in that way.
Yeah.
So you also identify as mystic, as a person who's come from fundamental religion. A lot of us, ex-vangelicals, we will either go progressive Christianity first and then, on out to atheism. And then sometimes we go sort of more this mystic route that you and I find ourselves in. So can you tell me about that journey for you?
I guess it was at the end when my last marriage was ending. For the years before that, when our marriage was on the rocks, we were trying to, what are you supposed to do when your marriage is on the rocks? You get in a good church.
Counseling and prayer.
And get a good small group. And you get into good community. And that's how you save yourself.
Pray the divorce away.
Yes. And so we were trying to find this church. And we wanted to be progressive. And I was going to a church that met in a warehouse. And, I was like so progressive. And but then there would be these things that would happen that would just not sit well with me. And my ex really, really liked to go to churches that had like really good music, smoke machines, the whole thing. I'm the one sitting there going, well, for what you just spent on that fucking smoke machine, you could have fed someone. But, what do I know? What I wanted to see was like a women's community and like women uplifting each other and encouraging each other and having Bible studies together. That's what I was looking for. We went to the church like 2 weeks after my accident, and that was the moment when I stood there, because I was the person that had always like loved worship and my hands are up. I'm, really feeling the Spirit. I remember standing there. I'm looking at the screen with the words on it, at people raising their hands, and I'm like, what are we doing? Oh my God, what are we doing?
So did it feel like theater to you? Or?
Yes, I was like, oh my God, this is not real. We are worshiping something. We're not here.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is so wrong. This is not it.
Yeah.
This is not what brings that peace. This is like a ritual. This is like, it's dopamine. And I mean, it's very emotional, and a lot of what we want is to feel something.
I just remember having the same struggles in these same sorts of churches. The hard part for me, you just scratch to the belly and you're still in the same independent Baptist fundamentalism with the same suit and the same slick back hair. Even though...
Skinny jeans. Don't forget the skinny jeans.
Even though you're in skinny jeans and spiked up hair, right?
And chucks. It's fine.
So it to me, it was just such a confusion.
Yeah, and I think that's what I started to see, was that progressive Christianity is, for me, was a ruse. It was an illusion that I really wanted to be real, but it's not, because at the end of the day, there are very few women in leadership in places like that. There are no gay people, not openly. You can be gay and like keep that quiet, but you're not going to be in leadership.
Sure. And
so at the end of the day, it's not all that different.
Right. It just looks different.
It's marketing.
Yeah.
Worship is, I would find out later when people go to like a theological seminary and they're learning worship, that there is actually a calculated method.
Sure.
Of building the emotion, building up to that dopamine hit, and then boom, there it is. And you're like, oh my gosh, my heart is exploding. I'm so close to God right now. Don't even know what to do. You're just having a dopamine hit.
Yeah. And it is, for many, their drug of choice. And it does. It feels good when you're in. It does. But when you're out or you're questioning, it is the most uncomfortable experience.
It really is. And I can't really explain that.
Yeah.
It's just, all of a sudden, it's like the blinders come off and you see. And it's like, the emperor has no clothes. And I feel like I keep having those moments of seeing. Like, there's so many layers to it.
The last thing we have in your description is intuition activist. What brought you to that?
I think finally I realized that when I was talking about, I would keep going to another thing and making it a religion, and then going to another thing and making it a religion. What I realized was that I was doing that because I did not trust myself, because I had been taught I could not trust myself. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Okay? People telling me I was never really a Christian. I know the verses. I had really believed that I could never trust my own emotions. I can't trust my heart. I can't trust my feelings. None of that is real. None of that is valid. I can only look to God. In the fundamental evangelical world, looking to your pastor, your deacon, any man in power in the church is the equal to looking to God, right? Because they are the messenger of God. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I had learned to always seek approval and affirmation from other people because I didn't feel like I could trust myself. And when I finally started working in birth, and birth requires a level of intuition, because I work mainly with birthing folks who are having unmedicated birth. I work in a birth center. So you have to be able to move in your intuition a little bit there in order to cope with pain and that type of thing. And I realized that's what was missing. And so I started dabbling in things that developed my intuition, like oracle cards and like meditation, and realizing that all those feelings, thoughts, things that had always been there all along, they were real. They were right. That my intuition, it was leading me in the right direction. And but I would run the opposite way because I didn't feel like I could trust that. So little by little, I just started trusting it and realizing like, oh, I don't have to follow a program. I don't have to follow a plan. I don't have to follow a belief system. I don't have to follow a movement. I can change my mind. I can change my beliefs at any time. They've changed in the last year since my mom died. They've changed again. I don't have to sell my soul to a belief system. Mm-hmm. I don't even have to be in a belief system. Mm-hmm. Even to say that still feels really blasphemous. Like my body cringes up when I say it still, because that conditioning is there that says, nope, you're just we're all selfish people. And I'm like, nope, I'm actually the most loving person right now that I've ever been. I'm actually the most authentic person that I've ever been. I'm actually, despite the fact that I've been through a lot of hard stuff in the last year or two, I'm actually the most content I've ever been. So all the things they kept telling me could not be found outside of God and Christianity, I finally found way outside of God and Christianity.
So you do a lot of coaching and lives and readings, and with this anti-devotional, what are you sort of trying to do with folks as you go on live and as you put your podcast out? What is your goal with the anti-devotional right now?
So I'm probably getting ready to change the name again. But but the idea of the anti-devotional is that you are just allowing your thoughts and feelings and desires to come up and be explored. So I tell people, like, what I used to do is I would sit down with my Bible and probably a devotional, but read a verse and like, how can I apply this to my life? What is this verse saying to me today? It's kind of cherry picking, you know. What I do now is not much different. I just turn over a couple of cards and I look at them and I'm like, what is this bringing up in me today? Just the way it used to do in a verse, right? And then when I read for other people, that's kind of like the Bible study version, right? Somebody would give you their perspective on it and you would be like, you know what? I never thought about that. Yes, that is true. And that's what I do when I do readings for other people. And all you have to do is decide whether or not it applies and resonates with your life and where you are at the moment. And it's not all that different.
Yeah.
You know, it's just the same. There's a different medium.
Recently, my best friend and I, we credit your mom all the time for introducing us and helping us build our friendship. And it's now a 20 plus year friendship. We were built on pimento cheese from your mom.
Built on pimento. My mom makes the best pimento cheese, hands down.
Hands down. And I got to stand in the kitchen and make it with her. And I'm going to make it for you and see how it stands out. We've been going through some stuff in our world, and so we did a reading for each other. She pushed me even in mine, because you get into that mindset when you're in a practice to trust the practice. And then you don't necessarily question it always to the level you should. And she's like, I pulled this card for you, but I challenged the cards. Right? And because she did that, a 2-card spread turned into a 5-card spread, but it made more sense. And was able to struggle through that reading in a way I never have before, because she was willing to challenge the cards for me and go, my intuition says, I'm trusting myself more than I'm trusting this process.
Right.
I'm using this process. This process is not using me.
Right. And it doesn't dictate what I'm doing with my life. Mm-hmm. It's simply kind of
pulling out whatever's already there.
Making me see things maybe I've overlooked. And, when I read for other people, you can say it's psychic, right? But it's really just connection.
Yeah.
That's all it is connection. And connection is mystical. As human beings, we are built to connect with each other, to be in community with each other.
So we definitely are people who are in a space of deconstruction and reconstruction. And I liked what you have to say on your website. In order to break these cycles and patterns of influence in our lives, we have to deconstruct and reconstruct simultaneously. And that's where you can come in to help. Talk a little bit about that.
So move it from blocks to a cycle.
Okay.
Right? So think about the moon. Every time, you've got the moon is new, it's dark, you can't even see it. It builds, it builds, it builds, it gets full, and then it wanes and goes back to new again. And that is how you deconstruct and reconstruct simultaneously. Something happens in your life and you're like, oh my gosh, that's a problem. I don't like what this is doing in my life. So I'm going to, kind of dive into this. And that's the waxing part. Okay, let's look at this. Let's take some action on it. But then the reconstruction isn't what we think it is. We think, oh yeah, it's building it back up. No, the reconstruction is looking at what you just built and evaluating it. That's the waning part, where you take time to step back and go, okay, I broke that down, built this back up a little bit. Now, how does this look? How does it feel? Does it need to be tweaked? Is this it? Did I overcome? Or is this something that I'm going to go through a few more cycles of this? I'm going to tear it apart again and put it together a little differently the next time. That's the part we miss, is that time to evaluate, and that's where we evolve. And so too often what we're doing is see ourselves as a project to constantly be managed, and something broken that constantly needs to be fixed and repaired. That's not what it is. The moon is always there. It's always whole. You just can't see it all at one time. Even when it's full, you can't see the whole thing. You're just seeing one side of it. Cyclically, now, that's going to work for you for a while, and then suddenly it's not going to work. Mm-hmm. When my mom was dying, all the things that had worked for me stopped working. Mm-hmm. That's not because anything was wrong with me or because I was broken. It's because the cycle was changing, and I was looking back and evaluating what I had built and realizing that's not going to work right now in this cycle and in this season. So I've got to look at something different. Pivot! I pivot and my beliefs change again.
So tell me a little bit about that. If you want to do a spoiler right here, you had mentioned that you're thinking about changing. Where are you now?
I've never watched someone slowly die, but watching my mom go through this process of her cognitively leaving me and all of that just brought in so many other feelings. And honestly, I went through another whole crisis of faith that I'm just now coming out of. I went through a whole phase where I was like, these cards don't mean shit. This is all bullshit. Since my mom's death, I've had an existential crisis like every Saturday pretty much. And I think what happens is we all do that, but we fight it. Like we're like, oh gosh, I'm doubting. I've got to fix that. I've got to fix myself. I've got to go harder. I got to be stronger. Instead of just saying, wonder if something different is going to work for me now. Wonder what's next. And I've tried to kind of stay in that place of just seeing what happens. I just was cynical about it for a while, and because I was processing death and watching death, and that made me question everything. As a human, it should. I've learned a lot about myself in the last year. So where am I now? I think I'm going to dive back into birth work a little bit more.
Did it hit you particularly strongly dealing with all of that death as a practitioner of bringing life into the world?
Oh my gosh. I thought that because I'm a midwife, there would be something magical even in death for me. Mm-hmm. And there wasn't. My mother had dementia, so she slipped away from us over a period of years. We started losing her well before her physical body left us. Birth is always a metaphor for me. Like, I'll tell people, you're just in transition. That's the part right before you start pushing the baby out. The baby's coming. I didn't feel any of that when I was going through death with my mom. And I kept thinking, where's my magical midwife thinking right now? But really, once again, I had made something a religion and put expectations on it that don't need to be put on it. And I just went through the death of my mom, and it was fucking hard, and that's all.
Yeah.
There was not a whole lot of magic involved, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, there's magic now because now she keeps sending me these messages in these weird, crazy ways. But at the time, there was no magic, and, you know, it took me a while to be okay with that. But I am okay with it now.
As a midwife, do you think sometimes for the mom, they're almost in the place you were, you know, in that death space, when there ain't nothing magical about this, just fucking hurts.
Right. Yes.
Right?
And, you know, I've even changed the way I help people birth. You know, I used to say things like, trust your body, and your body knows what to do, and things like that. And I really started thinking about it. When I watched my mom get dementia, I'm like, well, I don't trust the body right now. Yeah. Look at what's happening. Like, my body's done a lot of untrustworthy things.
Right.
So I've learned to stop saying stuff like that and to start saying, be in your body right now. Stay with your body right now. Stay connected right now. So I'm learning to keep deconstructing and reconstructing simultaneously in everything.
We're always dealing with the things past and making better for the things future. And that's the tension we live in now.
Yeah, because we're human with a human brain that stores shit in weird places and then brings it up at the weirdest time. That's physiological. That's not something we really have a whole lot of control over. But we like to feel like we do, and that's why we love religion.
Yeah.
Because then we feel like, this is it. This is the way I control that.
It gives us certainty.
Yes.
And that certainty is really, really seductive.
Once you realize there is no certainty, you can't go back. Once you see, you can't unsee.
So one thing you talk about on your website too is going after the things we desire with confidence and with peace, and moving toward the things that we want in life without guilt. So I'm wondering just how you put the guilt away and how you come into that confidence and peace.
Obviously, we're not meant to have everything we desire. Because sometimes we desire shit that's really bad for us that we don't realize is really bad for us. There's these spiritual ideas out there that, you know, run after whatever you desire. And that's not what I'm about. When I'm talking about, like, moving towards your desires, it's not even whether those things ever really come to fruition. It's the act of moving toward them that is the magic. You know, it's not up there.
Yeah.
it's not, the goal is not, for me, the goal is no longer ascension. The goal is presence, connection. And that's part of the deconstruction I've done since my mom's death. Like my connection sources have become even smaller. It's really here. It's not up there, out there, around there. I want to be here. I just want to slow it down and be present. And that's where I'm realizing, like, that's what saves my sanity. That's what keeps me grounded. That's where the joy comes in.
So tell me a little bit about, like, as we're closing out, what you really want to leave our listeners with and how they can come work with you.
So my book is called Wild Woman Wisdom, and the reason I call it that is because radical self-trust, following intuition, is wild. The word wild is like uninhabited, undomesticated, right? And so those are really uncomfortable spaces sometimes. Going into these wild spaces, that's what our intuition is. That's what radical self-trust is those wild spaces. So that's what I talk about in my book. And for me, the way of building radical self-trust has been cyclical living, because, again, I'm a Virgo. I need a little bit of a blueprint, please. The moon is very predictable, very consistent. And so, that's what I've used. It's that wild place where you tap into the real parts of you, the essence of who you are. And that part of you doesn't lead you wrong.
Thanks to 86 Aerostar for my groovy mood music and Bizry Creative Group for my mesmerizing logo. If you want to read my cards, or better yet, tell me your story, please email me at mediocremysticpod@gmail.com. Or you can check out my blog and interpret my dreams, or leave a comment on mediocremysticpod.blogspot.com. On social media, you can crystal ball me on Facebook and YouTube by searching Mediocre Mystic Podcast. On Instagram, you can vision me at Mediocre Mystic. On Twitter, you can scroll my prophecies at Mystic Mediocre. On TikTok, you can move through time with me at Mediocre Mystic Pod. If you're feeling like you need to do a good deed or make an offering today, go on over, subscribe, and follow, rate, and review Mediocre Mystic on Apple or any of the platforms you listen. Blessings in advance, my friends. Until next time, I'm wishing you luck on the hunt for that 4-leaf clover as we talk all things St. Patty's on the next show. Ad na If you don't speak Gaelic, that's luck of the Irish.